What's up, guys? It's the Farooqi brothers back with another video. And today for you guys, we're going to be talking about our favorite film series of all time, or rather favorite franchise of all time. So it's going to be a little more conversational, a little more fun. We're going to keep it chill. And we'll all kind of give our favorite thoughts, favorite film franchise, favorite films of all time. We're going to touch all of it. We might even do a little bit of our least favorite films of all time at the end, right? So let's get started right away. And maybe I'll kick us off. So when I think about favorite film franchise, the first thing I think about are big blockbusters, things that have existed for over a decade or more on film in different capacities. So when someone mentions this to me, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, are we talking like Lord of the Rings? Are we talking the Harry Potter franchise? Are we talking the Star Wars 9 films? Are we talking about the DCEU? Are we talking about the MCU? So it's hard to kind of pick out your favorites when you look at all of that. But the first thing that I would pick would be probably Lord of the Rings. And the reason I picked that is that those three films, even though they're a little old, and that's the only con, because I would have put it up against probably Harry Potter, because Harry Potter had a longer run, where it's consistent. But for Lord of the Rings, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, okay, you have three films, but each of them are so good that they stand the test of time, right? And then every film franchise has its pros and cons, because I count the Hobbit franchise part of Lord of the Rings, so then you had three movies that weren't as good, right? So it's hard to think about, but well, let's get to the answer as we go along the room. So like, and you guys can jump in. Like, where do you, when someone asks you what's your favorite film franchise, where does your mind go?
You know, honestly, like I know since we saw the same films, we grew up with the same content. For me as well, I think Lord of the Rings is just on every single level since we were kids till now as adults. You grab something new from it every time you watch it, and you just get so invested into the world. I know, like you said, Harry Potter is a bigger journey, so to speak, because of how long it went and how consistently good it was, which for 8 films, like that's a huge it's so commendable to them, because you see other big franchises like MCU and things like that where, you know, more than half of it is pretty lackluster, if we're being honest. So for Harry Potter to accomplish what they did in that stretch, I think is really great, and obviously has it as one of the highest or one of the best fantasy film sagas, film trilogy, film franchises of all time. But in terms of just the consistency of it, the tight nature of it, I think Lord of the Rings is just perfect on every single level. I mean, for its time, even it was the CGI, everything was so advanced, and it still stands to the day. The way the shots are structured, the way the score is, it's all pretty much masterwork and masterpiece of a film. And I think that resonates till today. And for me personally, I'd say in terms of a franchise or a trilogy in film, Lord of the Rings will always be number one.
So I think that Harry Potter, one of the amazing things about Harry Potter is that because there was such a long run, like 8 films, for 8 films to be consistently great, I think that makes it probably like easily one of the best, obviously, but it could even be the best, partly because, and I love Lord of the Rings too, I just think that like The Hobbit is not as good as the original Lord of the Rings. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're still great movies, but they're not, you know, like Harry Potter, one after the other, like just as a linear thing, like 8 movies straight, or well 7, but yeah, 8 straight were really good. So I would say Harry Potter, and then the storylines and the acting and all that stuff, the casting, everything was basically perfect. So for me, I would say Harry Potter.
But Umar, you mentioned that the Hobbit, you know, kind of lowered the value of the Lord of the Rings franchise as a whole. Does the Fantastic Beasts franchise also do that for Harry Potter? Because it is technically kind of like a prequel series. Does that ruin Harry Potter at all for you, or in your mind do you really keep them separate?
If anything, it makes it better. It's Fantastic Beasts. What are you talking about?
He has a point.
Nah, it doesn't. I don't know. It depends. It depends on how you would like. I would consider, yeah, it's part of the Harry Potter world. Like if we were to talk MCU, right? There's like mini like franchises within it, right? So the Captain America stuff compared to Iron Man stuff, it's the same thing. It's all MCU, but you could kind of compare and contrast. But as you would still you would still look at like the best of the best and go from there. But yeah, you're right. One can make that point that Fantastic Beasts is, compared to Harry Potter, compared to the first, the main stuff, it's not as good. So you could make that point. It's just like DC. No one's gonna choose the DCU now because Justice was garbage. So
Samir, what is your favorite film franchise?
See, the way I look at it is, I think more about how the appeal of how the universe is constructed within the saga. So my favorite has to be Star Wars, even though when you think about it, all the movies are pretty subpar. But the way the universe is constructed, and the soundtrack and everything, I think I like Star Wars the most. The question I have, though, is, would you consider Solo part of the Star Wars franchise?
I would say just like if we consider things like Fantastic Beasts or The Hobbit part of their franchises, I would say Solo and Rogue One are part of the Star Wars franchise. They're not part of the main Skywalker saga, but they're part of the Star Wars franchise. So it's interesting that you mentioned Star Wars, because this whole idea of the sum of the parts equaling the individuals, right? The individual equal the sum. Because I agree with Samir that individually, when you go Star Wars movie to movie, it's not like more good than bad. It's actually more mid than good. Because, I mean, we'll do a quick rundown. Episode 1, Episode 2, I feel like are subpar. Episode 3 is great. Episode 4 is good. 5 is great. 6 is subpar. 7 is good. 8 is good. And then 9 is good. I feel like they're all good. None of them are horrible. None of them are great. They're kind of just mid, right? But none of it's like, when you go through Harry Potter, you can say Harry Potter 1 and 2, both good. Harry Potter 3, 4, 5, great. Harry Potter 6, good. And then Harry Potter 7 and 7 Part 2, great. Or 7 Part 1, I would say is mid, but 7 Part 2, great, right? So, and then Lord of the Rings, I would say 3, masterpiece, and then 3, mid. So it's kind of weird because you don't get that perfection. The closest you get to consistently great, I would say Umar's point was right, that Harry Potter is the closest thing to being consistently great where there's no bad movie, I can't look at the Harry Potter franchise outside of Fantastic Beasts. I can't look at the mainline films and be like, yeah, this movie was bad. But for Star Wars, I can say it. For Lord of the Rings, I can say it. Not for Lord of the Rings, but I mean the Middle-earth franchise with like Hobbit included. So it's one of those weird things, right? So it's one of those weird things.
I think Harry Potter is also the most rewatchable. You could just literally, anyone can just put it on and watch it, any of the movies, and just because they're short enough, they're relaxed. Like you can just, they're not like to go. Like Lord of the Rings is a journey. You know what I mean? Like Lord of the Rings, you got to sit and like, even like the first time watching it, you have to kind of like let it play out, and it's amazing. And I think objectively, it's the best. It's the best franchise. Like just those 3. If you take out The Hobbit out of the equation, those 3 movies are better than any other 3 movies, including The Dark Knight. By the way, The Dark Knight trilogy amazing as well. But I don't know. There's something about Lord of the Rings that the others just don't have. It's probably the world building thing. It goes back to what Samir was saying, that like the actual world that was built was just amazing. Like and the amount of detail, having their own languages and stuff, like it's crazy stuff compared to the other franchises. So Lord of the Rings, obviously, I think everyone would agree is a different level.
And I think,
I
agree with Samir. He said something good about Star Wars, is that, and like Umar said, like the world building thing, because what Star Wars has that Harry Potter and even Lord of the Rings kind of don't, is that lore behind it. Like you get so invested in the theories and the what ifs with Star Wars that you don't do with the other films. And all the adjacent pieces like The Mandalorian and Clone Wars, they just help you get more invested, more excited about the world of Star Wars that the other franchises actually don't have. Maybe it's because the films don't provide as much as fans want in terms of the totality of the world and the theories and the things people want to see come back from past films or past books that people love also reading for Star Wars. So I think that's the one thing Star Wars has an edge over Lord of the Rings or even Harry Potter, is in terms of just their world and all like the connective tissue they have outside of the main films. I know Lord of the Rings are finally going to get a series for that. Let's see how that's going to go. But for now, in terms of just aside from the main films and the connective tissue that they add with Mandalorian, with Clone Wars, and etc., I I think Star Wars is on top.
I think with Star Wars, the other point is that it's generational because every 10 years you get 3 films rather than coming in one shot like Harry Potter did or Lord of the Rings also. They filmed all 3 movies at the same time. For Star Wars, you get 3 movies that came out in the 70s and 80s. Then you get 3 movies that came out in the 2000s. And then you get 3 movies that came out in the 2010s. So every 10 years you get a different trilogy. So it invites different fans where people double our age group also know Star Wars, but then people 10 years younger than us also know Star Wars. Whereas Lord of the Rings, if I ask someone 10 years younger than me, chances are they might not have even seen it, right? And with Harry Potter, again, there's a chance they might not have seen it. But for Star Wars, even if you haven't seen the prequels or the originals, you know someone. You're either connecting with Rey or you're connecting with Kylo Ren if you're in the modern generation. Or if you grew up like us, you're thinking about Obi-Wan, you're thinking about Anakin Skywalker. And then if you're in our parents' generation, you're thinking about Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Leia, right? So everyone has something with Star Wars, which makes it very graspable. But I think I want to jump off something Umar said because we touched on the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's funny because for a channel called Comic Book Debate, none of us picked anything to do with superheroes as our favorite film franchise, despite there being so many superhero films of late. So let's take a few minutes to talk about superhero franchises because there's some good ones, right? Because it's not just DCU and MCU. You got to look at the Dark Knight trilogy. You got to look at the original Spider-Man trilogy. You got to look at the Christopher Reeve films. You got to look at the X-Men films. Everything has a little place. And of course, there's the mainline DCEU, mainline MCU, even the Sony stuff, right? So where does that fit in? Like for Umar, I'll touch back with you. Like where for you does the Dark Knight or the Spider-Man trilogy with Toby fit into like this wider nexus of Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings? Like how do you value them compared to each other?
I would say that look, from a filmmaking standpoint, obviously the Dark Knight, like you could make the case that as a singular film is better than all the other singular films. So you can make the case that look, like that one run was so good that, and I think the Dark Knight Rises, like I think that's an underrated movie. Like that movie is pretty good too. Like I don't know why I think maybe because I think the Dark Knight was so good that people kind of wanted something along the same lines. But so the Dark Knight and the Sony stuff and the other, it fits, but I think it depends on what you like. It depends on your taste. So like some people like myself, we want to see a journey. Like we want to see the characters go on a long journey, right? And you can make the case that they do it in everything, right? But at the same time, like for example, the Spider-Man stuff, right? The Spider-Man stuff, the Homecoming stuff, the MCU Spider-Man stuff. There isn't a journey. Like it's not really like unless you take Civil War and Avengers, right? You just keep them in one thing. There isn't really a journey the guy goes on. He's the same crap. Tony Stark does something to somebody and then the villain becomes a villain because of Tony Stark. It has nothing to do with Spider-Man. So it's just not, I don't know. Like it depends what we're comparing. It depends on what we're talking about. There's too many variables, right? I think that same with the DCEU. Like it depends on how you're gonna view it. Like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, of course, amazing films. But then if you're gonna put the theatrical cut of Justice League, then we're gonna have a very different. If you're gonna put them as a whole, that's gonna bog it down. While if you just take Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, it's actually one of the best. You can compare, in my opinion, you can actually compare it easily to the Dark Knight trilogy. So it just depends.
And then for you, Samir, I always wondered, like for you, where does Narnia fit in all this?
The thing is, there's a bunch of other, fantasy or sci-fi sagas that we haven't mentioned, like Narnia, The Hunger Games, the Divergent series, Percy Jackson, which none of us have ever seen, I think. But yeah, Narnia's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Have you even seen it, Travis?
Just pretty good. I mean, it's okay. I mean, for Narnia, I was never into it, and I think me and Samir had this conversation a few days ago about Narnia versus kind of what we grew up with, because we have like a couple of years apart from each other. So, like when you grew up with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and then Narnia comes in the middle, like it feels like a B-tier movie. And I'm not knocking. If you love Narnia, you love it, and there's parts of it that I actually like as well. But for me, it never actually kind of fit with the rest of it. It's kind of like when you're a kid watching Barney the dinosaur, and then someone switches the channel to Dudley the dragon. How are you going to handle that? For Umar and Samir, their favorite.
Narnia is not my favorite. Narnia is not my favorite. Narnia is like, I don't know how to put it, but Narnia is like the theatrical of Justice League, compared to what was happening. Man of Steel, Batman, Superman, Lord of the Rings, you know? Man, Lord of the Rings, the third one was like, yeah, like, that's basically what it is.
All right, so this is a good transition because we kind of talked about our favorites, but let's talk about the movies that kind of don't do it for us, you know? Our worst like movies, you know? Maybe we can do either worst like franchise or worst like movie. But I'm not going first because I want to listen to what you guys say, so someone can go first.
Samir,
what is your worst movie?
What?
Samir, why don't you start us off?
What is the worst movie you ever saw, Samir? You're like, oh, this movie ain't it.
It has to be The Fixer, bro. You've seen The Fixer, man? Have you ever heard of this movie?
Dude, you mean a 5-carat film production?
Of course, AJ Cross, man. Where's the Oscar? But the movie itself, I don't know about that. Or why don't you give your...
The worst franchises.
Or worst movie.
Worst movie. Movie.
We just say it. This wasn't it. I mean, we just watched Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald 2 years ago.
Yeah. You could put that in there. I give it a 4, though.
That's a liar. You love that movie coming out.
I mean, Ziad, why don't you start us off?
For me, it's honestly very easy. I don't know guys how mentioned it. So, for my franchise, honestly, the worst film franchise I've ever seen is Ice Age. Like,
how dare you? How dare you?
There's nothing puts me to sleep faster than Ice Age. So, like, if you want to cure insomnia, don't go to the doctor. Don't take any pills. Put on any Ice Age film. You'll knock out flat in 5 seconds. So
I think it's great.
It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad.
It is literally the
I
worst.
think I love Ice Age, bro.
What?
You know, Simmer, that explains a lot of it.
Hey, any of them. Pick any worst one. The worst Ice Age movie is better than Justice League.
I wouldn't go that far. Ice Age is so bad.
Ice Age is great. I don't know what you're talking about.
But in terms of singular...
The first Ice Age is freaking... It's a classic.
The first one is a classic, yeah.
No, it isn't. It's so bad.
It's like Madagascar. Madagascar is better, but it's like in the same world.
Don't even put that in the same sentence as Madagascar. Madagascar has good writing. Madagascar and Shrek 1, they're in their own little circle. All right, so let me get
bruh. All
right, but for the singular worst film, it's actually a tie between two because they're both so egregious that I can't pick between them. So the first one is Batman and Harley Quinn. I know for superhero fans, if you watch that garbage, you know, it's like you can't get that time of your life back, and I feel sorry for you as well. But for this one, I know Strong Samir, this is like a cult classic for them. They live in that. And this is Cat in the Hat, the live action.
Oh man.
The worst film I've ever seen. I think in live action, Cat in the Hat's the worst. In animation, Batman Harley Quinn's the worst, and they're both irredeemable.
The Cat in the Hat has like amazing writing, bro. What are you talking about?
I want to put my
you canine American.
The thing about Cat in the Hat is that one, like Samir said, impeccable writing. Like the script is like hilarious. Number two, surprising cinematography, the set design, like it's really unique. You know,
the set design is the only thing going for it. Otherwise, it's just unwatchable. And
the performance by Mike Myers as a cat is really good. Why are we having this conversation? But
well, you love Doolittle, Shaw, so why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So, I mean, Samir already guessed it. The worst movie of recent history that I saw was Dr. Doolittle, right? Or just called Doolittle.
Whoa, are you sure there's another movie you're forgetting called Gemini Man? I think I better remind you of that.
No. Gemini Man actually has some redeeming qualities. Will Smith's in it.
And?
I'm just going to say the worst movie is Doolittle of recent memory. I'm like, I was just going to sit through it. Like, I was sleeping, you know? Like, Zion went to get popcorn or something in the middle of the movie. When he came back, he missed nothing.
Actually, I went to the most vital scene at the end, and honestly, I missed literally nothing. If anything, I missed that, so I didn't have to sit through it.
He literally whispered to me, he's like, oh, yeah, what happened? Nothing. Umar, what's your worst movie?
I'm going to piss off Shroud. Superman Returns is the worst movie ever. It's called what it is.
It wasn't that
You just watched that yesterday.
Umar, you loved that movie when it came out, so stop lying.
I loved one scene in that. And that one scene, let me just, for the audience, is where Superman saves a plane. And that scene is actually still one of the best Superman scenes ever. Call it what it is. But the movie sucks. The movie's garbage.
You know, speaking of Superman, I think Superman 3 is really bad. The third Christopher movie, Superman movie, is really bad.
Superman 3, though, anybody who watched it, Shiraz, you know this, the first half and the second half are completely different movies, though. Like, it died.
It's overall irredeemable. I think, you know, as more a joke choice, I think Spider-Man Far From Home is really bad. Not the worst movie ever. Because Ant-Man 2 was really bad. Like, that's a 1-star movie.
Well, Far From Home is the worst Spider-Man movie. So, like,
yeah, but Ant-Man 2 is worse than Far From Home.
Yeah, I think.
Also, I'm sorry to do it to y'all, but Birds of Prey is pretty bad too.
No,
not even close to that. Not Ant-Man 2 level.
Not even close.
Birds of Prey is better than Suicide Squad.
That's not Ant-Man 2 level.
Birds of Prey is better than Suicide Squad.
When me and Shiraz went to watch Ant-Man 2, all right, it was in 3D, and it was so bad that I literally just took off my 3D glasses and I couldn't take it anymore. Like, I'd rather have impaired vision during the film, so I didn't have to see what was on the screen.
Not gonna lie, I don't think me and Umar have even seen it. That's how bad it is. Like, we knew it was bad from the trailer.
You missed nothing. So, if anything, you saved yourself a waste of time. The Wasp was good, though. Like, she was a good character, but otherwise, it was just garbage.
Speaking of the MCU movies, what do you guys think about Black Widow coming up?
No comment right now. It's you know,
we can't talk about stuff we haven't seen yet. We can't.
There's something to be said about movies that have such a long production marketing cycle, especially because of the situation that we're in right now, that you just kind of lose hype. It's been like so long now we've been talking about it. It's like, whatever. It's gonna drop on Disney Plus probably, and then we'll just watch it. Whatever. You know? I'm probably not gonna be going to theaters to watch it.
You know two really good animated movies, Megamind and Surf's Up. Surf's Up might be Lord of the Rings level. We're talking like.
I'm surprised you bring up Surf's Up, but we out of all franchises, nobody mentioned the Toy Story franchise, which I always felt was like very impeccable. Like, the 4 movies are really good. Like, from beginning to end, you're not getting a bad movie. You're just only getting good movies after good movie. And then some are masterpieces. I think Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 3 are masterpieces. And Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 4 are both great movies. So I'm surprised no one ever mentioned that either. Samir's favorite movie, Bug's Life, you didn't mention it.
Not a franchise series, bro.
Wait, what did I just say? I said Bug's Life. That's part of the Pixar franchise, I would say. Pixar is a franchise. The question is, what is your favorite franchise? As you saw from our panel today, all of us have different choices. We all have kind of different tastes, even though we all grew up together. So obviously, there's a lot of similarities. Like, we all kind of were jointly praising Lord of the Rings, but we all had different tastes at the end of the day. You know, Harry Potter, Star Wars. We had different opinions on Dark Knight trilogy, Spider-Man, DCEU, MCU. And we also gave you kind of a flavor of the worst movies in our repertoire as well. Let us know in the comments what you think and join the debate. From the Farooqi Bros, we'll see you next time. Peace out.